I've been a coach for about 20 years. I've been in learning and development for even longer. Facilitation, training, teaching, that is the bulk of my background. Yes, I founded the center. Yes, I have a business in that. But my real calling in this world, my real work is in the coaching, teaching realm, really supporting human beings to access a part of themselves that perhaps on a day-to-day basis goes a little bit, let's say, unnoticed, untapped, that well of deep knowing, that well of deep self-understanding. So this is the work that I relish. It's the work that I've made my life work. It's the work that I've dedicated myself to over the last 2 decades. And today I really want to share that with you. But I was just going to say that part of my own understanding of this work was because of my own journey. Like this is not something that was just a theory that I created out of nothing. I went on a deep transformational journey of my own. And it was, an existential journey, a spiritual journey, a journey of understanding how the human mind works, how we make meaning, how we create experiences, how we're able to live a really optimal life. Because if anything, coaching, I think, stands for that, stands for this ideal that through this work, we can support ourselves and others to live an optimal life. Now, what that looks like, of course, varies for each person. But what I've noticed as I went on my own deep kind of existential journey, kind of questioning, like, what is my life about? What is it in service of? Who am I at my core? What is my work in this world? Like these big existential questions with no easy answers. I kind of landed in a place that said, there's something here. There's something that says the optimal life may be more than most people comprehend, that there's more to who we are and the potentials of our existence that than we're taught in schools and families and even in our communities, in our churches, and our societies. This information is not readily available. And I look back thinking, gosh, if I had known some of this during my own transformational journey, maybe that would have eased things a little bit. Maybe it would have accelerated things a little bit. Maybe I would have just been more willing to lean into it as it was, because it's undoubtedly challenging, and be less resistant, less of those times of shaking my fist at the universe, saying, what's going on here and why is my life the way it is? And I want to be of service, but why isn't it happening the way I want, in the way I want, at the speed that I want? That kind of angst that this deeper journey of self-evolution and self-actualization actually kind of requires. So before we go further into our topic today, which is the topic of, how we coach real transformation, I want to do a quick poll with all of you. And it's a simple question, and there'll be 8 responses, and you just need to choose one. Just intuitively go with kind of what feels right here. So the question, Jonathan, if you're able to put the poll up, is which of these has the greatest impact on your ability to go deep with others? Which of these has the greatest impact on your ability to go deep with others? Let me know, Jonathan, when we have a sense of being complete with the answers coming in. And then you can just display the results, and it looks like we've got a bulk of answers.
Yeah, answers are still coming in. I'll share the results in a moment.
Yeah, just give it time for people to read through it.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And here we go. Can you see it?
I am not seeing it, but I may have just accidentally closed it. So, something came up. I was like, "Oh, close." As I closed it, that may have been it. Just check with others to see if they are getting it.
Others
I
are
see
seeing
some
it.
thumbs up, so other people must be seeing the results. Okay, Jonathan, because I can't see it, can you read out a couple of the top ones?
Yeah, so 46% say the quality of your presence and way of being.
Okay.
17% say you have done transformational work yourself. Those are the
Okay.
top. Oh, and your ability to hold space from the heart is a third.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay. So folks, I'm not at this point going to share the answer, so to speak, with you because the answer requires context. I mean, this question is a contextual question. So as I share the context in the next little while, then when I do kind of reveal what I see as the answer to that, you'll be able to say, ah, okay, got it. Within the context, that makes perfect sense. So I'm going to start with this bigger question. I'm going to put up a slide here just for all of you. And it relates to the question, kind of the core question of today. And that is, if we're going to talk about coaching or facilitating real transformation, what actually is real transformation? And this was something that Jonathan was speaking to at the beginning, where he said, this term transformation is often conflated with the word change. That all change is transformation, which of course is not true. All transformation is change, but not all change is transformation. Transformation, even by definition, is a thorough change in form, a thorough change in form, a radical restructuring. And this is the term I like to use, a radical restructuring of our sense of self and our purpose and place in this world. That might be worth saying again. The transformation, human transformation, true transformation is a radical, revolutionary restructuring of our sense of self and our purpose and place in this world. It's not just change, it's sweeping change at a really fundamental level, like at a core level of our self-understanding. And that change at a core level of understanding influences things like our state of being and our mindset. And in fact, when we get really deep, we start to look at how we change the nature of human consciousness, which, to be honest, that's like my sweet spot in the work. Like I love that question. Like what does it mean or look like to actually shift human consciousness, to elevate it or expand it, however you want to conceive of that. But let's just coming back to this question of transformation, I would like to just share with you a metaphor that I think really encaptures this idea of transformation, and you're all familiar with it. And it's simply the metaphor of how the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Now that journey of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly is, again, something not everyone is really familiar with, but I think it so perfectly captures the essence of transformation, because transformation then has its own unique patterns, its own unique stages, and its own unique dynamics. And those dynamics then are what we're looking at when we talk about what is true transformation. So in this metaphor, but it's actually real in that sense, we're using it as a metaphor for the human experience. In that metaphor, the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis or cocoon. And in there, something quite remarkable happens. And this wasn't something that I learned until much later in my adult life. I had always thought that somehow the caterpillar morphed into a butterfly. It was a morphing process. I didn't know until, almost ashamed to say, I didn't know until much later in my adult years that it wasn't a morphing process at all. In effect, the caterpillar, it dies. It dies within the chrysalis. And what happens is it begins to turn into what I like to call a primordial goo of death and decay. A real, like if you were to open the chrysalis or the cocoon at that point and look at it, it would be this like this gooey stuff with bits of butterfly sticking out. But what happens in that primordial goo is that as it's dying, one day, and this is still quite unknown to science, like how this happens, but one day a new cell arises, it pops up, ping. And what happens is that the immune system of the caterpillar, which is not yet dead 100%, will jump on that new cell, seeing it as a kind of invader, and snuff it out. But then ping, ping, two new cells. And the immune system, not yet dead, still does the same thing, jumps on those emerging cells, imaginal cells as sometimes they're called, and snuffs them out. Ping, ping, ping. So now we've got this process of an immune system doing its best to battle the invading hordes of these new imaginal cells that are popping up, but it's still in death process. And slowly, there are more and more of these new cells popping up to the point where the immune system of the caterpillar dying can no longer keep up. And then these cells, these new imaginal cells, they form what are called cell clusters. And those cell clusters then form parts of the caterpillar, antenna, wings. And those then form together to begin to give merge the rise to this thing called a butterfly. And then in time, the butterfly emerges from the chrysalis. Now, what I love about this metaphor is because it does shine a light on these important dynamics of true transformation, this idea of this radical restructuring. It's saying that there is, and I'm just going to take down this slide for this, sorry. It's saying that there is a death process, a dying that needs to happen, Without that death of the caterpillar, without this, in a sense, dying to ourselves, we are not creating that inner primordial goo of death and decay in which these new cells of possibility can arise. In other words, there must be a death in order for there to be an emergence. And this is what's happening in deep transformational work, is that there's a real dying to the self. And I'll speak more about this in a minute, what we're looking at here. This idea of dying to the self and something then arising. And in real transformational work, that sense of arising often occurs in a moment that people refer to as a moment of awakening. A sense that there is something greater to who I am and the nature of reality than perhaps I've ever known or I've ever been taught. Just a sense. But there's also in that same moment, because the old self, the old structures, the old ways of being in this world are not yet fully gone. They're not yet dead, so to speak. Doubt comes in, uncertainty comes in, questioning comes in. And so those who begin this journey of transformation, who really embark on it, are going through that existential crisis. They're asking themselves these fundamental questions around who am I and what's the nature of life and is this all there is and what's the purpose of all of this? And these big questions start to arise. And those are not easy to answer kinds of questions. The answers may be provided for you in a book here and a book there, but the reality is coming to understand that as the nature of our reality requires experience, not just book smart. It's easy to say, well, somebody said that that's what this is all about. But in truth, we've got to come into that understanding of our own volition. So there is this dynamic of death and emergence that's taking place. And in that, we begin to sense this new possibility. So when we talk about coaching real transformation, we have to be very aware of these, what I call dual dynamics. Dueling because they clash with each other. There is a sense that the old self ideals are going to jump on the new self ideas to snuff them out, that doubt, that uncertainty, that skepticism that we have of this kind of sense of something greater, but that I don't know. That's a natural part of our human process as well. And we have to be able to coach that and understand those dynamics within the coaching, in the coaching space. And I just want to caveat, this is not just for the coaching space. This really is an understanding of yourself in the dynamics of life and transformation. If you yourself have been on this journey, then you'll know of what I speak. You'll say, oh yeah, I recognize that in myself. I recognize that questioning, that doubting of this greater potential in me. Those kinds of dynamics you'll recognize in yourself. Those experiences or symptoms of the transformational journey. So let me speak to another core question then, and this relates to, when we coach real transformation, what is actually transforming in the human experience? So again, I'm just going to put up a slide that'll help me speak to this a little bit more. Okay, hopefully you can all see that fairly well. Okay. Oh, I'm just going to move that out of the way. Okay, yeah. So what I love this image. I call it the onion image. It's this idea that there is an essential reality to who we are at the core of our being. But over a lifetime, often from the moment we're born, we start to take on ideas from the world about who we are, of what we're capable, of what we're worth. And we make those our own because as children, as you know, we're like little sponges. We're just taking it all on. So there's a psychological term here. You may be familiar with it called our self-concept. So as it says on the slide, our self-concept is a conditioned, learned set of beliefs, values, ideas, attitudes about who we are and how reality is. And we start to develop this self-concept from a very, very young age. And it grows and strengthens over a lifetime, particularly through experiences that validate the self-concept. So as a simple example, if you're told from a young age that you're not worth much, that you're not capable of much, you will likely have experiences through life that validate that, and that sense of self strengthens over time. And a lot of this is happening unconsciously for us. We all have a self concept. Some, we might say, have a more healthy concept. If you're generally born and raised in a family where there's a positive, nurturing environment for you, contrasted to being born in a family which may be abusive or neglective, you're going to have a different degree of health, so to speak, to your self concept. But all of us, no matter where we're raised, we start to develop kind of an ego-based self-concept, meaning we begin to develop a shell that says, I'm not really 100% safe in this world. And I have to do certain things to be safe, and I have to do certain things to survive. And we take those things on. We begin to develop certain masks that we wear, certain personas that we carry. We start to try to show people that we're something, we're this, we're that, so that people see us a certain way, so that we can feel good about ourselves and we feel safe, feel successful in the world. So all of this begins to form this onion of our self-concept. Let me just take the slide down for a minute there so that you have the image. All of this forms the onion that I'm calling our self-concept. So what happens in transformation is that ego-based self-concept, it starts to shake and quiver a little bit. What's happening is as though that light that is the reality of who we are at the core of our being begins to shine a little more brightly. Something is awakening within the mind that's saying, hey, there's more to you than this. This is what you've been learned. This is what you've been taught. This is what your mind holds to be true about the nature of reality. But there is something more to you, something more to life. And there's just this moment of sensing of, yes, what is that? Okay. And with that, we can say the journey of transformation begins for those people who are really willing to open themselves up, really open their life to all of this. So bringing it back to the coaching piece, most coaching, though, we call maybe transactional coaching, even developmental coaching, is really concerned with upgrading the coding of our reality. It's about an upgrade, like doing something better, performing better, speaking better, communicating better, better relationships. Like there's a performance improvement aspect to a lot of what we do. And that does help people move to their potentials. But the reality is a lot of coaching is not concerned with the fundamental structuring of our self-concept. Like what's really there that's baked into our understanding of who we are. And if we don't really look at that deep wiring, and we're not looking to, let's say, rewrite the code versus just upgrade the code, and then that's a good way to look at it, isn't it? Like rewriting the code versus upgrading the code. When deep transformational work, we are looking at how we rewrite the code. And it's not in a way that you may think. It goes back to that image of the caterpillar. Transformation, true human transformation, has its own kind of self-volition to it. It moves of its own accord. And therefore, this death and emergence process is already happening. So when we talk about, let's say, shining a light on these core concepts of who we are, if we're shining a light on illuminating the ego-based self-concept, if we're really doing that work, that stuff will begin to reveal itself quite naturally in this process. The shadowy side of ourselves, and I'll speak more to this in a minute, what I call the shadow side, it's going to reveal itself within us. It's going to reveal itself for transformation. And at its core, then, transformation is a healing journey. So we're healing. And I don't mean healing as in there's something broken. I mean healing is in a recognition of our essential reality, a recognition of our essential reality. And going back to that image, kind of at the core of who we are, there is something that is utterly whole and complete, as it is, a seed of vast potential. But it gets masked, it gets covered up by all of that ego-based mind gunk, if you will, that can mask the reality of who we are. And so deep transformational work is looking to illuminate more and more of that essential core coding or operating system, to reveal it for what it is, not to judge it, and not even necessarily say we have to fix it. It's not about fixing it, and it's not about figuring out a way to get better at something. It's really allowing a very organic process of revelation, illumination, and then a kind of natural healing that wants to happen when we understand all that is getting in the way of the recognition of who we are at the core of our being. All that's getting in the way of the recognition of who we are at the core of our being. And that is the essence of transformational coaching, and that's the essence of transformational work in whatever form it takes. And there's a movement, and I love there's a movement from this idea of an ego-based self-concept, kind of falling away, the stripping away of all that is not who we are at the core, to the flourishing of and I call it a soul-based self-concept. So the self-concept doesn't disappear. We still, as human beings, continue to carry a self-concept, a sense of who we are, purpose and place in this world. But it's a question of what's informing that. And as we start to let go of more and more of the ego structures that comprise our sense of self and our sense of what we can do and our possibility and purpose, as we start to let go of that, the soul-based sense of self can simply emerge. And then it becomes just simply a matter of allowing that emergence to flourish. So a large part of transformational work sometimes is just getting ourselves kind of out of the way of this self-volitional process doing its thing. Yeah. So let me show you another slide here because it can be helpful to understand just this, in a sense, the scale of what our ego-based self-concept can be comprised of and what makes transformational work so very, very challenging for people and why it's not something that happens in a week or even a 6-month period of time. Often this work of kind of healing, this work of transformation can take years, decades, even in fact, to really come to this point where you sense, yes, yes, there's something here that is utterly true and real for me. And your whole life shifts because of this. And this is the beauty of the work, that the emergence of that kind of butterfly within you forever changes the way that you experience life. But we have to go through a process of really illuminating, examining, and even healing then these layers of our ego-based self-concept. So let me just share the slide with you for a minute that gives you a sense of the scale of it. Okay. So just take a moment to read just through some of this. There's a lot there's a lot here. And it doesn't mean that every human being has all of this, but every human being has some of it. We all carry false self-images about who we are. We've all been taught by our families, by society, certain things that we have to do or be or responsible for in order for us to be successful or accepted or liked or loved. And we carry those within us. When we get down to really the deep core stuff, it's things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe in this world, right? And it's deep, deep work to outwork the grip of those ideas of yourself. Because for many people, it's like they've been wearing a set of glasses, let's say it's like sunglasses, shaded glasses for a lifetime. And all they know is life through that lens. There is no sense of self beyond what has been perceived through that lens. And yet something's being tickled in the mind that says there's more to you than perhaps you've ever known. But what that is, it's like, and how do I just, it seems easy to take off the glasses, but the reality is when you are living through an idea of yourself that has been there since childhood, it is baked into you. It is embedded in your mind, deep in the subconscious. It's alive in every cell of your body. The biology of belief, it's there. And it's no simple task simply to just let it go, just by saying, well, I let this go. But this is the work. This is the work of deep transformation. We start to look at all these pieces of ourselves. Again, let me just take the slide down. We begin to look at all these pieces of ourselves, these distorted perceptions, the masks, the false identities, the unattended sorrow. That's a big one. And I borrow that term from a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it for those of you who do deep grief work with people. Stephen Levine's book, Unattended Sorrow. And it simply means that we all carry around, kind of like a gigantic bag, the sorrows of our life, which includes losses, disappointments, betrayals, hurts, and slights. We carry that around with us like a bag of bricks, often leaving it unattended because life has taught us to, well, you know, pull up your bootstraps and get on with it. So we're taught to mask certain emotions. We're not even taught how to do grief work. We're not even really taught how to be with this stuff. So we just pack it away, stuff it away, repress it, and get on with life. But the reality is it exists as an energetic body. I think Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now calls it the pain body. It's an energetic body that's alive within all of us, unattended sorrow. And if we're not attending to that, if we're not giving it space to be felt, to be heard, and to ultimately be healed in a very gentle, heart-centered way, then we continue to carry that around and it affects us. So all of these things I call our personal gravity. I like that term, personal gravity, because it's kind of weighs us down. We don't necessarily know it, again, because if it's been there for so long that it's all you don't know life beyond it. Like I've had many people say to me, you know, Leon, I know I've heard this thing that's say called love. I know what love is. Like I love a person, I love my mom, I love my dad, but I don't really know love as a field. Like what is love? I don't know it. So if you think about that, like, okay, how do you help someone to know something like that when for a lifetime they've never really been in that field? So there's a journey into this sense of who I'm becoming that is as important. That's the emerging piece. That's as important as the letting go piece. And both of those core dynamics are at play in transformation all the time so that we can get to the essential truth about who we are. And that's really the core of this work. It's to get the essential truth of who we are. Like, who am I beyond all of this? Like, who am I truly? So it's a journey of self-actualization, ultimately. When I look at transformational work and true transformational coaching, it's not just facilitating change, which can be very helpful. And at times, we're going to do that no matter who we are. But what we really want to do is help people examine the core self. And as I said before, this is frightening for some people because it's disruptive, right? If everything is good in your life, everything's going along just fine, like why would I want to rock the boat? Transformation brings with it the questioning of why you do what you do, why you experience what you experience every single day, why you have the friends you have, why you live where you live, why you feel this is important and that's important. Like real transformation requires an examination of these real reasons why you do something, the real reason you pursue success, the real reason you want a promotion, the real reason you want money, fame, adventure, security, whatever it may be. It requires us to go deep into that. And as we go into that ego-based self-concept, what we often encounter, what we will encounter, are the fears, the core fears that ripple through our existence every moment of every day. And they're calling out to be dealt with, core essential fears. But as I said, looking at those, being willing to do the work on those, that's a journey for people. And not everyone is willing to take that. I can share with you a story I had of a gentleman I worked with for a couple of years, and he was a successful executive in a big multinational conglomerate. And he had a kind of a core wound, let's call it a wound of childhood. From a very young age as a child, he'd been taught that he must absolutely respect, if not fear, authority figures. And in the company that he was working, in the position that he held, he was encountering people who had great positional power and authority, in their domains. And he had to work with these people. He had a position that required him to persuade, to negotiate with them towards kind of collective ideal of the whole organization. And he noticed that whenever he got into a room with them, he just kind of felt like a little boy again, especially if they put on any veneer of dominance or control or command and control behavior. In that moment, that little boy who had been taught to respect, if not fear, authority arose. Like there he was. There's the little boy. So through our work, we revealed that. It takes a great deal for a human being to be that vulnerable where they will really tap into that part of themselves where that child, that wounded child exists. Yeah. So I hold this person in great reverence in that way. Like I don't share this story in any way to diminish this man, but I want to share it because it's also a case in point of when people recognize the depth of some of this stuff and the grip that it's held on them for their lifetime. And then they see the work that may be needed to move beyond that, they can pull back. And his exact words to me at the end, when we really, I guess I at one point I just put it to him. I said, listen, this is the work that lies ahead. It's a healing journey. We're really going to have to go into this for a while. And I can't say how long it could take. It could take a week, take a couple of months, but we're going to go into it. And he said, Leon, I don't have time for this now. Could we do this next year? Those were his exact words. Could we do this next year? But next year never came. In the sense, I don't mean time-wise. It came in time, but it never came for him. That never came for him. It was too much. It was too disruptive. And so he chose instead to just live with that. And again, this is not to judge him because that's the beauty of this work is that each human being is making a choice to experience what they would like to experience in this lifetime. We are experiential machines. So it's simply to say he made the choice to retain that aspect of his ego-based self-concept, that it wasn't worth the journey to let it go. But that's not the case with everybody. That's not the case with everybody. And as transformational coaches, as deep coaches, what we're learning is to be fully accepting of those choices. It's not to move people to something that they're not ready for. Always sitting with the axiom that we meet people where they're at. We meet people where they're at. And if they're not ready, we can hold open a potential. We can hold open what I call a portal of possibility. Say, listen, there is a world beyond this that you don't yet know, but would you like to find out? Would you like to go on that journey? And I'm here with you on that journey. I've walked this journey. That's the key thing, isn't it? To be able to say with a whole open heart, I've walked this journey. Would you like to go with me and explore what this would be? And then people have the right to say yes or no. It's all good. And we just hold that as the way it is. The acceptance is there. The love for that person still remains. The potentials are still held out. Nothing is closed off. But we recognize that people in this journey are not always ready. Some people just don't want to look that deeply at themselves. So again, no judgment. It is as it is. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn how to support them to take the step off the cliff, that we can't learn how to support them to put on wings that perhaps they didn't know they had and use them to fly. It doesn't mean we can't do that. And that's why I love this work, because we're teaching people how to create spaces in which people are willing to touch that part of themselves and to do naturally, quite naturally and organically, very much from the heart, not from the head, how to move into these spaces within themselves in which that greater reality already exists. And then to do the work to let go of the ego-based self-concept and to let come of that soul-based self-concept so that we really begin to flourish in the world. Yeah. It's not about tools. It's not about models. It's not about systems. It's none of that. Because we're not just equipping people with tools. We're equipping people to be that which enables others to connect to the deepest part of themselves. We're equipping people to be that which enables others to connect with the deepest part of themselves. Okay, so that means for us too that we will have had to walk this journey, right? That this journey becomes a journey of self-experience before it becomes a journey of relating that experience to someone else. We've walked the fire of personal experience. So let me come back to that poll that we had at the very beginning. Which of those factors? Let me just, I've got a slide with them on. Let me just grab that. I'll just put this up again so we can kind of refresh our memory on what was all there. Okay, so this was the poll. And the answer, let me just get to that. Got another slide. I'll get to that here. The answer, well, I'm going to start with one answer and then I'm going to build on it because the reality is, as I said, now that you have the context of transformational work, you can begin to understand what I'm going to say here more readily. So the answer is nuanced. But the first piece of how to coach real transformation in another human being is that you have done deep transformational work yourself. So in deep coaching, we work with this axiom that your transformation enables transformation. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, wrote that the greatest gift that you can ever give the world is that of your own transformation. And I hold that to be an absolute existential truth from my own experience and the years kind of working with this, that if you're not doing this work for yourself, if you have not walked the fire of experience of deep transformational work, if you've not taken yourself to the edge of your own existence, if you've not looked to heal the shadowy parts of your personality, you've not looked to let go of your personal gravity and the pain body, you've not done that deep work with yourself, you cannot really support another person to do it. Not in the deepest realm, you can't. When we look at therapy, we have this classic image of the therapist sitting with a patient going through something, and the therapist is sitting on a chair and the patient on a couch. We've kind of got this image that the therapist is able to help the patient, even if the therapist hasn't gone through what the patient has experienced. Let's say there's a mental health issue. The therapist doesn't necessarily have to have experienced that. But that's not the depth that we're going to here. The depth we're going to here is that I recognize that having walked the fire of experience, it is that which has equipped me to be the one who can support others in their own transformation. Now, it doesn't mean that I need to be fully transformed. I don't even know what that really means to be fully transformed. But to be walking the path. It's like that saying, you don't have to be a master to speak of mastery, but it sure does help. It behooves you to be walking the path of the master if you're going to speak of mastery. And that's really all we're saying here is that you have to walk the path. It's very difficult to support someone to dive to the depth of the ocean if you're standing on the beach or if you're standing in shallow water. You really yourself would have had to dive to the depth of the ocean so that you can guide others to the depth of their oceans. And that's really the reality. So there are questions around this. Do you do this work for yourself? Maybe what have you been avoiding? What have you been ignoring? What is calling you in terms of that kind of dying to the self process and that emergence process, that part of you that wants to really, truly come alive in this world? So that's the first piece, but it connects to the second answer. And the second answer is this: the quality of your presence and your way of being. Now, I love this, that all these answers are now, you're going to see that they're interconnected. So as you transform your reality, the quality of your being begins to change. This is fundamental because deep transformational work changes who you are at an essential level. Your consciousness shifts. It expands, it elevates, however you want to conceive of it. And the vibration of your being becomes lighter as you drop those gravitational fields. And today you may not even recognize the degree of gravity that you carry and the influence it has on your presence. We can be completely blind to this because we don't know until we go on this journey. And then we start to recognize, my goodness, There's a quality of me and my beingness that is emerging here that is more brilliant, more magnificent than I've ever known. So now the quality of your presence changes because you've done the transformational work. And that leads to this one. That leads to this one. As the quality of your presence changes, you become capable of creating unbelievably safe spaces. Because when our being is heavier and denser, others are interacting with that. It's all unconscious, but there's an interaction, a sense, that my life is safe with you because you are this expansive container of possibility yourself. That there's no part of you that is deeply contracted and restricted still. But you're open. And because I sense that in you, I feel I can put my life in your hands. And when I put my life in your hands, and I know that my life is safe in your mouth, that this is not a place of judgment. This is a place of just infinite possibility while grounded in the reality of our humanness. Now I'm willing to open up to you the deepest, most intimate parts of myself, the harshest shadows, my greatest shames. Imagine when people can share with you their greatest shame. And they're not doing this because you need to fix it. They're doing this in service of the illumination of that which is to be no longer in them, that which no longer serves. So in that trust, people will reveal their life to you. And it happens because the quality of your presence changes. It's not even what you're doing so much as a coach anymore. This is what's amazing. Yes, what you do can get in the way, particularly if you're intellectually driven and your coaching or your work with people is just about questions and probing and analysis and that piece of it, if you get kind of wrapped up in that, that can get in the way. And that then leads to the fourth one, the ability to hold space from the heart. So as your presence changes, as you become the presence that transforms, as the quality of your being becomes one that is far more spacious, accepting, aware, loving, open, people open their life to you. And now the space, the container matters. And it's got to be of the heart. This is the piece. It cannot be a held space in which the intellect dominates. There's something in the heart. It's the intelligence of the heart that is at work here. People, when they're transforming in human terms, are opening to an essential truth of themselves that is, in a sense, the essence of soul. And soul is spirit, and spirit is of the heart, the spiritual heart. I'm pointing to this, but I'm not referring like necessarily my human heart. The spiritual heart that emerges. And when people are in a space that is of the heart, that is essentially love, they heal. People heal in the presence of love. This is the biggest piece. And to become that one that is that container, that's your personal journey. The one that the first one is talking to, your transformation. It brings you into the space of your heart. And so when we work with coaches in the deep coaching work, these things are about us first and foremost. Before we say, well, I'm going to be able to do this or that for another, we have to be able to take ourselves into the infinitely expanding space within ourselves to recognize our own essential nature and to understand the journey to get there so that we can hold that container as one, again, who has walked the fire of experience. And so the last one, and this wasn't on our chart, this wasn't on the poll, but I put this one up here anyway because I think it's really a vital one, is this ability to foster emerging potentials of selfhood. I know that's quite a few words put together, but there's something in this that there is a learning for coaches that I've noticed and for people who want to do deep transformational work with others. The letting go piece, that kind of death dynamic, that one seems for many people to be more readily understandable. Like, how do we support people to really let go? I'm just going to take the slide down again. How do we support people to really let go of those aspects of themselves that are really no longer? The more challenging one, the new space for people interested in this work, is then how do I actually foster the emerging potentials of selfhood, that emergence piece, right? So as people are coming into this sense that there is more to who I am than I've ever known before, that needs to crystallize as a reality, as a known, hmm, so that it becomes my reality. It's not just a thought that I have that I step into once in a while, but then when I go back into daily life, it's long gone. It has to crystallize as an existential reality. It's effectively like a new paradigm of experience. So we have to be able to foster or create experiences that foster these emerging potentials of selfhood and that make them concrete for people, that crystallize them as their reality. And this is a process. This takes time for people to do that. But then when they come into your presence, into your coaching space, into your facilitated spaces, into your classrooms or your conference rooms, it doesn't matter. There is a sense that you're holding out a potential for them. They may not even sense it consciously, but there's going to be that sense that I am safe with you, that I can touch something in myself that's real and true. And the more that happens for them, the more that becomes crystallized as their reality. So there's a quality to the container. And this, as I mentioned before, all relates to our ability to transcend the intellect and to really live and teach and be much more from the spiritual heart and the intelligence of love. And I really put that word intelligence in there because when we're talking about love as an existential reality of a universal reality, we're not speaking about the emotion that human beings feel, though we feel it emotionally. I'm speaking about an intelligence, a force of intelligence that invites life to come to life. And that's where we're learning to land within ourselves so that we can facilitate that experience in other people. And through all of this, this is the dynamics of death and emergence are playing out. And in time, then we give rise to a sense of something altogether new and different. In essence, it's really just who we are at the core, a remembrance of selfhood. But there's a journey to get there. And that's what real transformation is. It's a healing journey, a journey into ultimate selfhood. It's a journey of self-actualization.